All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to After School Advocacy 101. We're very excited to have everyone here this morning to talk about after school programming and how we can make sure that we're representing the programs that we all serve and all the important work that you all do. We have a wonderful team of individuals that are joining us here today as well to talk about after school programming. And I'm very happy to introduce, we have Senator Luz Escamilla who's joining us. She's the Senate Minority Leader with the Utah State Senate. We may also have Representative Angela Romera joining us as she becomes available today as well. So we'll keep an eye out for her. And Angela Romero is also the House Minority Leader. So we're very excited that we have minority leaders for both the House and the Senate that are so supportive of after school programming and everything that we do. I'm Ben Schwantelman. I'm the executive director with the Utah After School Network. We are also joined by Angie Toon, who is a school-age childcare specialist and the chair of our advocacy committee at UAN and a current fellow with the White Riley Peterson Fellowship, where she is learning more about advocacy. Anna Thomas, the policy director with Voices for Utah Children, and Chris Neitzey, who is the director of state policy with the Afterschool Alliance. We're very excited to have them all here to share different perspectives on a state and national level and to talk about everything that we can be doing to support after school programs. To kick things off, I'm just going to give a bit of a general overview of what we're all facing right now in after school programming and funding that's impacting after school programming. This also is impacting licensed childcare centers in the state as well. I want to emphasize that everything that we're talking about today, I mean, overall, my major goal is that everyone leaves feeling more prepared to engage in advocacy, regardless of if it's supporting after school programming, licensed childcare programming. If there's a bill that you've caught wind of that you want to either vocalize your support for or speak out against, I want you all to feel like you're more prepared and emboldened and empowered to reach out and have those conversations with lawmakers. It's really important that we understand that lawmakers are accessible, that it is their job to support the causes that we want to get behind. And any lawmaker who comes across as inaccessible to you is not doing their job because that's exactly what they're there to do. So we want to make sure that you all feel good about engaging in that process. So starting off, and this may not be news to a lot of you, but over the last couple of years, we've seen some very dramatic shifts in the funding for after school programming in Utah. The majority of programs in Utah are typically funded through federal pass-through grants that support our programming. That is the 21st Community Learning Center grant, the CCDF fund that comes through the Office of Child Care, TANF funding that also comes out of the Office of Child Care. Currently this year, those are the funding resources that we have for after school programs. Last year, we had over 25 million that was available to after school programs because we also had some state funds that were invested in after school, as well as ARPA funds that were available for programs. At the end of the fiscal year, we saw $10 million come off the table for after school programs. And we don't currently have any state allocation of funding that is available to after school programs, which is a very dramatic shift. So all of the major funding for after school programs are all federal pass-through dollars. Those are programs that are generally very secure and safe, but I know that a lot of people are also feeling some anxiety as the Department of Education, which oversees the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant, is under the knife to potentially get cut. We are also, and I think Chris will talk about this a little bit when he gives his overview of the national landscape, feel that it's not an imminent threat to the Department of Education, but it still doesn't feel good knowing that that there's a threat to that as well. So like I said, we've all seen a massive shift in this. It's something that has compromised funding for a number of programs. We've seen a few programs around the state that have had to close. We've seen programs that have had to limit their capacity and the number of youth that they can serve. So we actually have right now kids that had access to a program that no longer have access to a program this year, which is a really huge deal. And I know that that's upsetting for anyone that's participating in this conversation. That in total was a 41% decrease in funding. What does that look like in practice? So we are seeing demand for after-school programs and childcare continuing to increase. We saw from 21 the 21 through 22 school year to last year, attendance increased significantly for youth and programs. And I can also say that currently, last year's attendance from the 23-24 school year remained about the same as it was the year before that. But what we're seeing here as well is if you look at the number of available programs, they've been steadily decreasing over the past 3 years. And that's largely in part to that funding shift that we've seen. And this just doesn't add up as we know that the demand is increasing. We have increased demand for parents to return back to the office from remote work that a number of them have been able to do. And we're also seeing increased demand on things as we are also greatly impacted by the overall economy as costs are increasing for things that also increases costs for childcare providers and after school programs. It's also increasingly difficult for providers to pay their staff a fair wage, which is also huge. And we know that programs that retain youth longer are higher quality. We also know that programs that have retained staff longer, those staff are building stronger relationships with the youth that they're serving, which in turn also makes sure that the youth that are attending those programs are sticking around longer. So seeing these funding changes it has implications across the board for parents, for kids, for communities, for our workforce, and a number of different things. So Angie went through and found a few specific bills that are adjacent to after school programming. Right now, there are no specific bills in Utah that are directly affecting after school programming, but there are a number of things that do impact our programs, impact our youth, the parents, and the communities that we're all serving. So Angie, do you want to go through and talk a little bit about each of these bills that you've identified really quickly?
I
Unless that
am
was
proud to
Anna.
say
Sorry,
I did this slide.
Anna
Um,
Thomas with Voices for
yeah.
Utah Children prepared this slide, which I'm grateful for.
Well, Voices for Utah Children and the After School Network have been working together a lot and increasingly over the last couple of years because so many of our interests align, making sure people are paid a fair wage for working with kids, which is such an important job, um, and also encouraging advocacy among people who work with kids. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview. Admittedly, these reflect issue areas that Voices for Utah Children works on. So if you have other questions about things I didn't address, you're welcome to put them in the chat. I'll probably answer them after I'm done talking. Or if we have time, you can ask questions as we go along. So I'm going to start with the bad news so we can end with the good news. The bad news is it's going to be an extremely challenging session for kids and for the general public, which is why we're so excited to have new voices involved, people with your on the ground expertise to stand up for the kids and families that you serve. It makes us all stronger, and your legislators are then not they're less able to ignore your valuable input. So I know it's kind of weird to talk about taxes. Kids don't pay taxes, lucky them. But all the funding that Ben mentioned, all the funding for public schools, all the funding for health programs for kids, that all comes from our taxes, either our federal taxes or our state taxes. And you probably have not noticed over the last several years that your income tax rate has gone down because most of us aren't rich enough to benefit from income tax cuts more than, 50, maybe $100. This year, there is another proposal to lower Utah's income tax rate. It looks like it could add up to more than $200 million a year in lost funding. So we kind of can't work on any other kid issue without addressing this issue. Kids are expensive. They are our most important investment. And our legislature is reducing the available revenue for programming instead of growing it to meet the growing needs, as Ben outlined. So they've been steadily doing this year after year, and it's added up to more than $1 billion that we don't have to spend on kids this year. So when your legislators say money is tight, what they may not be telling you is that they have made it even tighter. And obviously, that's not every legislator is responsible for that. This push definitely comes from our legislative leaders who exercise a lot of control. And thank goodness we have advocates like Senator Escamilla and Representative Romero to be there, stand up, push back, and speak the truth about some of these things. So you may find yourself being in the strange position for the next few weeks in your community, even explaining how taxes are good for kids. And so they are our investment into their future. And so stuff that happens around cutting taxes really limits what we can do in the future to serve kids, to grow wages, all that kind of stuff. If there's no money there, we can't do any of that. Some of you, I'm sure, have heard of Utah's new school voucher program. It may not be a bill that you can track. We'll get more into that later, but it will get more money. This is sort of a national push that Utah has hopped on board with. It does not deliver the promised alternatives and outcomes for students. If parents in your program are thinking about it, they should really do a lot of reading into the background of vouchers, but that's going to be a big focus during the session. Just remember, the research year after year after year after year shows they don't work for kids. They don't leave kids any better off, and in some cases, they disrupt and worsen their learning. Sadly, our little kids from immigrant families are going to be under attack, either directly or through their families. I put a link in here. I don't know if it's in the notes, you guys can see it and drop it in the chat, but it's really an effort to connect our immigrant communities with all sorts of terrible issues that they are not responsible for and largely are not contributing to in the way that state leaders say. A couple of years ago, Senator Escamilla, was it just last year? Or the year before, was instrumental in expanding our state healthcare program to include kids that maybe aren't US citizens, right? Those kids live here, they're growing up here, they need access to healthcare too. That was an amazing win. And of course, it will be on the chopping block because people don't understand how important it is to help those kids. And then we'll see again in the childcare area, attacking regulation and oversight that keeps kids safe. And we just saw yesterday a homeschooling bill came out that would say, oh, you don't have to do criminal background checks on parents for homeschooling anymore. And obviously that puts kids in a really, really dangerous position. Regulation exists for a reason. It's burdensome because our kids deserve and require a lot of help and oversight. So if you want to switch to the next one, this is the good news. Um, uh, Folks like Senator Escamilla, advocates like Utah After School Network and UAEYC and other great groups that work on early childhood issues have done a really good job over the past 5 years elevating the issue of childcare at the state capitol. So there will be several really positive proposals um, to expand, improve, invest in childcare. So these are kind of the things that will feel good, proactively fighting for instead of feeling on the attack. And you can kind of keep up with these if you want on our Voices for Utah Children website. We have a bill tracker there that you can use. And it also has some blog posts that describe the bills in different areas that we're looking at. There will be an effort to expand funding for the state's preschool grant program. So you may work at an organization that gets some of that money for preschool aged kids. The funding has not grown in years, so there will be a request for an additional $5 million to put toward that program. We know we have the capacity to fund up to $24 million worth of preschool, but you got to kind of ask for what you think is reasonable, and that is what the appropriation sponsor, Senator Fillmore, thought would be a better ask. The child tax credit that barely exists will barely expand this year. Even though, don't worry if you haven't heard about it because nobody's been able to claim it yet. This will be the first year that you can claim it on your taxes. But we have a tax credit that is supposed to like give you money back in your pocket to take care of your kids. It does not really work that way. Very few people can actually use it because all of the restrictions. But a child tax credit is a great policy vehicle for getting kids and their families out of poverty. So we'll be supporting this because it's an opportunity to talk about these kinds of tax credits that are so helpful for low-income kids particularly, and keep people's minds open to what it really could be, not just so small. There will be sort of a state-level policy attempt to like put into state law the Indian Child Welfare Act provisions so that whatever happens at the federal level, Native kids in Utah will have their connections with their families and their culture preserved through government programs. That's a really positive one. Great involvement and leadership from the tribal leaders in our state, which is very cool. And then there will be, this is kind of weird because it's not normally something we would support. This is basically money for the Division of Juvenile Justice. But they've added a significant element to their programming that is all early intervention, getting kids help before they land in court, getting kids help before they have a record. And so this funding would go to support more of those proactive programs that keep kids in school, keep them out of courtrooms, and hopefully address some of the underlying causes that their family is struggling with. So that's a really fast, crazy overview, but I hope that's helpful. Ben and I thought, even though you guys are in the after school, the education world, you care about a lot of facets of your kids' lives. So there might be some in here that jump out to you as something that you really want to speak to during the session.
And just so everyone knows as well, we'll be linking on our website to Voices Bill Tracker. We are also following several of the different bills as well. Later on, I'll share a spreadsheet that we've been collecting them in as well, so you can check those out and read up on them a little bit more. We'll also show you how to find those bills and navigate that system as well. So it's all out there and it's not too hard to navigate. So thank you so much for that, Anna. Next up, we are going to turn to Senator Escamilla and Representative Romero to talk a little bit about more of what they're seeing this session, some of the things that they're really putting emphasis into, and things along those lines, as well as some of their own tips and suggestions on things that they would recommend you do to advocate for programs. So let me see here, and I should be able to spotlight you as well, Representative Romero.
Good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me? Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you. So yeah, it's nice to go after Anna as she provides all these comprehensive pieces related to children. So I'll say there's always kind of like the doomsday piece as we enter into a new session. This is my 17th session, so I've seen a lot of things. I've seen cycles within our state in terms of responding to different, crises, whether it's a housing crisis, obviously the pandemic, our budget pieces were brutal after, 2010, 2011 with budget cuts of up to 20%. So we've been through a lot, and these are kind of like expected cycles of our economy, and of course, when really catastrophic things happen. And I'll say this because I was able to codify after school programming, high quality after school programming, and I know my good colleague and friend, Minority Leader Romero, is an expert in her working where she works full time on this area. So it's nice when we can team on with evidence-based and just expertise like hers. But after school programming was something that I codified, as well as home visiting programs, all of this evidence-based and with standards that the federal government has put some of those best practices and evidence-based standards in place. But it's really good that Ben explained that the state of Utah literally invests zero in our early childhood education, no childcare at all, and of course after school programs. So we depend heavily on the federal monies, and this is a place where we should be concerned and alert, because this the administration that's coming in and the president-elect has been very vocal about, and Project 2025 has been very visible on targeting everything from Head Start programs and all the way to some of the childcare pieces, like what are we going to do with the child independent care tax credits and other programs that exist. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we're doing nationally, as well as I'm part of an NCSL group that is focusing on those childcare tax credits and so forth. But here in Utah, one, I think Anna mentioned this trend to deregulate high quality childcare, or even the ability to register if you're going to be providing childcare at your home. So the home daycare centers have been fully deregulated up to 8 kiddos, and that is very problematic. So I am in collaboration with some advocacy organizations, including Voices. We have opened a bill file to bring it back. So at a minimum, we have a way to know who is actually providing childcare, which, by the way, and charging for the childcare. So there is a lot of issues related to just consumer protection, and of course, the welfare of a child, which should be our number one priority. But what is more scary is we're hearing a tendency to continue to deregulate even more, with more kiddos inside any place where childcare is being delivered. And that is certainly a trend that is very scary. And we hope to get the support from everyone of how this is a bad idea. I mean, there is no way right now, literally as of this year, we don't know how many childcare home daycare centers are in our state providing, through a business transaction and a contract, childcare delivering childcare to kiddos if they have less than 8 children. That is a problem, and we will fight back on that. The other one, I'm in terms of the infrastructure, after our cliff of $400 million that I know we discussed last year here, in terms of childcare. And I use childcare because a lot of those services and monies can also be utilized for after school, but it's mostly that 0 to 5. I think we are trying to really change the pragmatic way of looking into the 0 to 5 life of a child, as not just, not childcare, but really early childhood education and prepping our kiddos and our infants and toddlers so they can come prepared to kindergarten. And that's what we're trying to do with this. So I'm running a couple of bills related to just childcare. And one is the one that it was very had a lot of support. It was going to be the only bill that was going to have some type of investment from the state, and it was killed in the House in a very just unfortunate way the last couple of days. And that was going to, again, that bill will retrofit our current state-owned buildings that we are paying as a state for maintenance, and we were going to utilize them and retrofit them to high-quality childcare centers and create a private-public partnership with businesses, whether they were a large employer or co-ops of smaller businesses, so we can find through this investment of the state, providing a free location for this childcare entities to provide childcare services for these employers, having some of those seats available, coming back to those communities in those areas, and our own state employees and military personnel as well. And so, again, this is another tool. This is not going to solve all of our childcare, obviously, problems, but it is just trying to open spaces, because one of the biggest problems we have in Utah with childcare deserts is access, period. Of course, affordability is an issue. So just know that there is an effort even within the National Council of State Legislatures, which is NCSL, and our own Senator Wayne Harper is the president. And also Representative Minority Leader Romero will talk more about her national leadership position, having legislators from our legislature in those positions. And like I said, she'll talk more about hers as the president of NACSL. We have opportunities to also push at the federal level certain pieces. And, like I said, this Saturday, actually, NCSL is having their executive committee meeting here in Salt Lake City. And I am presenting on one of those a resolution to support, again, the want to separate the dependent care assistance program, the DCAP, from the child independent care tax credit. So I know those are at the federal level, but we think again there is an impact in that direct correlation to that. The next bill, and I'll just be brief here, is this idea of having a very comprehensive way of addressing early childhood education and access to those programs in collaboration with a good workforce development, because we also know that many of those individuals providing this professional, needy, very needy work are one of the lowest paying professionals in our country. And that is a problem. So if we want to create a pipeline of professionals that are going to be equipped with the tools and resources to be effective early childhood care providers, and in your case, after school professionals, we need to elevate, and make sure people understand how critical the services are. So I'm creating a semi-pilot program with Utah State University to have some credentialing and assistance, technical assistance for individuals that want to open their own home daycare centers. How to be also good stewards of a business, because you may be a professional on the service you're providing, but if you're opening your own, childcare center or want to be a home daycare center, you have to also run like a business. So providing those technical assistance, but also all the credentialing to be early childhood developers and educators that are equipped to do that. So, I mean, again, workforce development also supporting, because what we see is many of the providers are the ones that are struggling the most with actually access to high quality childcare, which is devastating to think about that. And with that, I know there's more to talk, but more than happy to answer any questions, but I'll pass the time back to Ben. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator Escamilla. Representative Romero, would you like to share a few things as well?
Yeah, I think Senator Escamilla covered a lot of it, so I'm here more for questions as well. I just think it's really important as out-of-school providers, after-school providers, that you distinguish yourselves from daycare centers. There's nothing wrong with, daycare, but I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between daycare and how those are run in the private sector or at homes versus after-school programs. Not saying that they're not, but a majority of our programs are run through municipalities or nonprofits. And so a lot of times people don't understand the difference between the two. And I think it's very important for them to know. And because I would hate to see after school programs wiped out because there are many people we serve with. And I don't know if anyone went to the Salt Lake Chamber panel that was there for legislative leaders that I was on with the leadership from the majority party. But their lack of awareness or knowledge between after school programming and out of school time and daycare there's a big gap. So I think I know you're going to be doing a bunch of networking up there, but I think it's really important to distinguish between the two. That's just my perspective from someone who is just getting all the messaging and looking at all the bills because we're so focused on daycare, which I think is important, but we can't forget about the out of school time and the after school component of it as well. And for those of you that don't know me that are on here, my name's Angela Romera. I'm the other leader. I'm the leader of the House Democrats. And as Senator Escamilla mentioned, I'm also the president of the National Hispanic Caucus of State Legislators. So I travel more than I'd like to, but that's over in December. But another issue that's of great concern to many of the families that you're serving is it's a national movement on immigration, but we've seen that the House Republicans in Utah take a lead on that. And I'm not saying this because of party affiliation. This is just a information you can take with it what you want. But there's been tying immigration to public safety, and there's been major concerns for many of the families that I represent and many of the families that we serve. And so I think it's just really important that that's on your radar and that we're getting the proper information about it. And so when me and Senator Escamilla have been doing what I call our roadshow with the speaker and the president at the Capitol, I always talk about immigration and remind them that when we're talking about immigration and about pushing the federal government to do comprehensive immigration reform where that should happen, we can't just talk about it from a public safety perspective because then we reinforce stereotypes. And I'm sure many of you who serve mixed status families have heard the fear from the families you're serving. And so these are things that Senator Escamilla and I will continue to work on behind the scenes. Sometimes I don't want to say what we're doing because I don't want to put people at risk, but just know that we're there and we're doing it. And that's all.
Thank you both so much. So while we've got you here, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, we're gearing up for the legislative session. We've talked about a number of bills that are adjacent or that will impact kids. What do you think are some of the best ways for some of our after-school providers to reach members of the Senate and the House of Representatives and to really have some impactful conversations with them?
I can start on that. I really feel like you should reach out first to the person who represents you, and so whether it's in the Senate and the House, and then I mean that's ideal, or where the program you're working for provides services to students, because we get so many requests and there's just not enough time in the day to meet with everyone that wants to meet with us. But I always prioritize my constituents. And if I can't meet with them, I'll have my staff meet with them. And or if you're advocating for something that's with a program that's within my district, I will try my best. But there's no way with the demand on myself and Senator Escamilla that we can meet with everyone that wants to meet with us, because our first duty is to represent our constituents, but that means a lot of times we're in committees and we're on the floor. So I just want to make that very clear, that although you might put in a request, that doesn't always mean you're going to meet with someone just because of just the time. I know we always have this conversation before the session, but these conversations also can happen prior to the session. And the best time to really engage with your elected official or the elected official that represents the area you're working in is to reach out to them before the session starts and before the holidays start. So, the perfect time to reach out to us is from May until October, and we're more available and have more time to have longer, more conversations with substance, just because we're not working our full-time jobs. We're working our full-time jobs, but we're not up at the Capitol full-time, because when we're up at the Capitol, and in particular myself and Senator Escamilla and anyone who's in leadership. Our days start at 7 in the morning and they don't end until like 9 or 10 at night. And I'm done.
Maybe I would just add, Ben, I think one of what would be helpful, and I know it's hard because you will say, well, there's no specific funding or bill on after school programming or after school in general. And so the people may say, well, that they're not dealing with any of our issues. But if it's impacting the families that you're, serving, or if it's impacting their ability to provide food, or, that is going to have an impact on your services at the end of the day. So I think Anna mentioned the repeal on the state chip program bill, that it took us collectively 5 years and a lot of tears to pass, a lot of efforts, and we finally passed that bill 2 years ago, and it took a minute for implementation. It started implementation January 1st of last year, and the good news is we have excellent data points in terms of outcomes. Their utilization of emergency room is almost non-existent for this population now. They've been, like very small compared to even general numbers. Their utilization of preventive care and accessing, which is what we wanted. When you have healthy kiddos with access to care, you will have good health outcomes, and it will reduce our costs. So we are in a reactionary. I was right now speaking to another group at the University of Utah, and I'm like, my job is to kill that bill, HB 178. I will kill that bill. And, it sounds a little bit violent, but without over dramatizing, it is legislative day. So, but I've had I had a constructive conversation with the sponsor of the bill, very respectful way. So the next thing I will suggest is that when you are engaging, even if it's something that is very close and dear to your heart, and it may be impacting you personally, to use your, like the manners that we learn at a young age, and our little skills and interacting, you have to be very respectful. I always tell people, be reminded that legislator they just may be coming out of a committee where their bill just got killed, or they were, in a very stressful moment, and you're approaching them. Just know that, out of the 104 members, I will say most of our colleagues are interested in hearing from constituents. They're good people that deeply care for the state. We may have different ways of wanting to fix and make our state a better place, but overall, they want the best. So I want to sometimes humanize a little bit of those legislators. It is a very high stressful time during session. So your interactions may be short, a little bit cold sometimes, but it's because we are in that pace, and it's not an excuse for being rude, clearly. So, certainly that's not what I'm trying to excuse, but just know that in some instances it is a high pressure, stressful environment. So know that most people care, but it's sometimes hard, like Representative Romero was saying, or Minority Leader Romero. For Democrats, we have to cover all the committees. So sometimes it's hard. We may have more committees and more meetings than other legislators, especially our Senate Democrat caucus of 6. It is a challenge to cover all the committees. So we sometimes are in committee hearings all the time and on the floor, and one of our voice may be a very small voice in the group, so we need to be there and speak up. So please, know that we will continue to try to be accessible, and I think most legislators are, but we want to hear from all of you, and your voice matters. And you are, especially if you're emailing or texting your senator or legislator, make sure you say, I'm your constituent, and even tell them where you live. That makes a big difference. We will, legislators will always prioritize their constituents. They are who got them elected and put them in the place they are, and our responsibilities is with them. The other part is to make sure what bill you're talking about. Do not just say HB 178. I mean, also just maybe put a name to it, or just have the little basic information. If you don't know the answer to a question, so if I ask you a question and you don't have the answer, do not make up an answer. Just say, Senator, I don't have the answer. I can get back to you. It's okay not to have all answers. But if you're building a relationship with a legislator, trust is critical. And if someone lies to me, that's a problem. It was going to be very hard for me to trust again. So know that trust is very important. So if you're going to be interacting with legislators, it's okay not to have an answer. It's okay to say, I don't have the answer, Senator. I will get back to you. Utilize the interns. Interns are, we all get an intern, and they're literally our personal assistants, and they are with those legislators all the time, and they can be very helpful in arranging appointments or connecting or even passing messages. We have very capable, qualified interns. Just be respectful to them as well. You know, they are working and they're our staff during that time. So they're not just some students that are spending time with us. They literally get trained and have a full-blown full-time position with us during those 45 days. And they're a staff of the legislature. So I think that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah, I
so
think
much.
there was a question in here
Yeah.
about if somebody is like, if you know a senator is really pro deportation, how do you talk to them about um, Senator Escamilla's bill? And that's a really good question. And I just always try to bring a human face to everything. But if you know someone's very anti um, immig immigrant, or I don't know if it's worth your time trying to persuade someone
Yeah.
who is um, already set on something. And I don't know if Senator Escamilla wants to work on that, because it took us 5 years to get that bill passed, and a lot of people behind the scenes helping her with that bill. And so I don't know if we want to tie deportation and what's happening and some of the rhetoric being used by the House majority, because it's not the Senate majority pushing that. Um, I don't know if we want to do that. So I think Senator Escamilla, that'd be great for you to answer.
Yeah, thank you, Leader Romero. I think that's a good question. So I'll say this. In my conversation with Representative Neil Walter, that's the sponsor of HB 178, he's in the St. George area. He's relatively new to the legislature, so I've never had a chance to interact with him a lot. We had a pleasant conversation. His point and his reason for running this bill, he said he believes is incentivizes the behavior of more illegal immigration coming our state. That's his words. So I'm quoting him. And so what I try to explain, and I think what's unique about interesting and very unique to this bill, to this statute right now, is that this is a pretty unique population. And I don't know that that it incentivizes anything. If anything, we're trying to be fiscally responsible. So these are the talking points. Fiscally responsible because we currently have about an $8.3 million uncompensated care of utilization of emergency room in children-related emergency room utilization. That is being paid somehow by by all of us collectively. So if we can have adequate coverage for a population that will have to go through a very strict eligibility criteria, which includes proving that the parents are working and paying taxes. That is a uniqueness of this bill, that they are working. So I don't know that this encompasses a population that he or some of the incentivizing any type of behavior. It is our reality of a broken immigration system that the state of Utah has absolutely no jurisdiction over, and we will never fix. And so we're focusing on the healthcare and the fiscally responsible way of dealing with emergency room utilization, which is extremely expensive and the worst place to get primary care. So if you're trying to address this conversation with someone, immigration will be fixed at the federal level. We should put our efforts for that, but this is not going to fix the immigration system. I don't know that. By the way, the program is a pilot program. It has a sunset review, so we will be reviewing data, and also it's already capped. So there's no more, so we are saving money at the end. So we will be developing more talking points with Voices for Utah Children. You probably will see them. Be aware and be careful if you don't feel very comfortable, like Representative Romero said, addressing with someone that you know where they stand on some of these issues. But if you are going to be talking to people, we will set some talking points on this.
Thank you so much. I just have one final question for you both. We're really trying to emphasize as well, along the line of humanizing this cause and making sure that it's clearly understood the impacts of these programs on communities and families, really encouraging providers to recruit more parents as champions, encourage kids to even reach out as well. Can you speak a little bit about what impact you think having a diverse mix of voices that are advocating for after school and childcare may mean to lawmakers?
I think it's great, and I think it's how you do it. So it's not inundating us with emails that are just cut and paste. I dread the cut and paste emails that we get that just say, do this. And I understand people took the time to email it, but I rather hear like a personal story or if it's the mass email, but there's been a personal story added to it or someone talking, to me about an issue. Because again, a lot of times we may not even see that email if our interns are working on something, and if it's one of those mass emails, I might not pay attention to it because I might just give them the same mass response. They sent me a mass email, I'm going to send them the response. And so for me, the way that I'm going to interact with someone is really when it's one-on-one saying, hey, I'm your constituent and this is why I have this concern, or hey, I work for an organization in your district and this is why I have this concern. And I also say coordinate with the sponsor of the piece of legislation, whether it's Senator Escamilla or someone else in our caucus relate to something that's important to you, or the representative, because sometimes people have good intentions and they could hurt our bills with their good intentions because sometimes we might have a strategy. Maybe we don't want people talking in committee. Like I Anna mentioned one of my bills with ICWA, which is making sure that now that the Supreme Court ruling happened amongst Native American children and foster care and adoption, what are my bill? I've been working with our tribal communities on this is really about we're messaging it a certain way. I don't necessarily know if I want people helping us message that because sometimes people will come to try to think they're helping us and they come and testify in the committee and then they make our colleagues ask more questions or they turn off our colleague and they use that as an excuse not to pass one of our bills. So I guess what I'm saying when you're concerned about a bill, interact with the leaders within your organization that are working with the representative to find out the best way to message it. And then also just be, when we're looking at legislation, and we didn't go into too much detail about this, first the bill has to come out, or the resolution has, if it's a bill, has to come out of the Rules Committee and it gets assigned to a committee. So if there is a bill that you particularly like or don't like, if you don't like a bill, a place to, as we use the word kill, because we do use the word kill, a place to kill that bill so it doesn't go onto the full floor is to do it in the committee. Or if you really like a bill, a place to get support for it is talking to those people in that particular standing committee that will be making that decision about that bill before it goes to the floor. So that's where I think the most powerful place to influence a legislator is in those standing committees. And I don't know if I'm sure Senator Escamilla would agree with that, but that's where you want to do that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is be very mindful about how you message. Make sure you're talking to whoever you work for and that is working closely with us. So we can tell you the best way to support a bill is because I also am rerunning my Murdered and Missing Indigenous and Relatives Task Force. And there's people that have good intentions that want to testify, but what they do is they go and they tell all my colleagues that are not from an Indigenous community how horrible they were and what they did. And especially now with Netflix running the movie on the massacre in Idaho, which personally impacted my family that got massacred, my family, because I'm, my Shoshone side. But I don't want people going up there telling people how evil they are because that doesn't help us. So I just want people, I'm just being very honest. So I just want people to be very mindful that maybe you think someone is not a good person, but they're going to make a decision whether our bill is going to pass or not pass. So just be very mindful of how you approach if you're in a testifying committee or how you're going to approach someone is in opposition to something that we all believe in, because one person can set the wrong person off and kill a bill or kill a funding resource that we all need and that we really need here for to be able to provide out of school time for kids or for daycare services.
Thank you both so much for your time. We're so appreciative of you taking the time out of your very busy days. I know that you have very full plates as we're gearing up for the legislative session to kick off next week. So we're really appreciative of you being such fierce advocates of after school programs and then taking time out of your schedules year after year to meet with after school providers to help empower all the work that they're doing and to advocate for everything that they do. So thank you both so much for your time. You're welcome to stick around for however much you'd like throughout the rest of this training, but we also won't be offended at all if you have to go off and reclaim some of your day as well. So thank you very much. We are greatly appreciative. Thank you. Okay, so next up, I'm going to turn it over to Chris to talk about the national landscape of after school.
Thanks, Ben. And yeah, I want to echo Ben's sentiments about Senator Escamilla and Rep. Romera. Like, I work with a lot of states and state networks, and not every state has the access or senators and representatives willing to join something like this and really share all their expertise. So you've got some great representatives that are here and supporting a lot of the work you do. Wanted to chat a little bit about the national landscape of after school. Ben alluded a little bit to this at the top of today's meeting, kind of what we're seeing. There's a big transition happening on Monday with the presidency. Congress has already changed over earlier this month, so we're starting to see some things happening there. But before I get to that, and I think, Ben, can you change to the next slide? Before I get to that, wanted to share a little bit about the Afterschool Alliance. I know some folks here are probably familiar with us, but there might be some folks here that have not heard of our organization. We are a national nonprofit. That's our mission there. We're based in Washington, D.C. I'm myself based in Baltimore, Maryland. But we have the pleasure of working on what we say on behalf of like the after school field and really kind of relaying a lot of that information to representatives in Congress, the administration, and then policymakers and many of the federal agencies. So next slide. A lot of the ways we do a lot of our work. Here are some of the ways we do this work. We are what we're like a three-pronged organization. We do a lot of research on the needs of programs themselves, on the needs of families when it comes to after school programs, and then looking at like the different issues that are of mind with legislators or the field. Some of the ways we do that is through the America After 3 reports, and some of y'all might be familiar with that. Every 5 to 6 years, we release a new America After 3 report. We are in the field now with, I think we're in the field now. If not, we're in the field very shortly, collecting that data with the parent surveys, and we'll be releasing that later this year. So that'll be exciting. We'll have all updated data. The last release of that was in 2020. We kind of wrapped up collecting of that data in March of 2020. So all of that was pre-pandemic. This will give us our first like full look at what after school, like parents think of after school, the demand, the support, the programming elements after as we've emerged from the pandemic. We've got a voter poll coming up as well in February. Actually, Ben, can you go back for a second? Nope, we're jumping ahead. There we go. We've got a voter poll. So this is a national voter poll of registered voters and their support for after school. I will say the data looks great, or the numbers look great, and that'll be coming out next month. And then the last thing, tomorrow we're releasing our chronic absenteeism brief. So keep an eye out for that, and looking at the issue of chronic absenteeism and some of the ways that after school has and can support getting kids back involved in schools and back in the classroom. And alleviating some of those absentee concerns. Messaging and advocacy tools. I know the networks, we do a lot of work with them on developing this, and the networks do a lot of dissemination of these tools. We work with state and local partners, so the statewide after school networks, the city intermediary organizations through Every Hour Counts, the actual programs themselves that we work with. We've got an ambassador program that we run every year where we pull in ambassadors from key states and localities and help train them become spokespeople for programs in their regions. We work with, as I said, we're based in DC. We have national allies and coalitions we work with. Lights On After School is our big event that we coordinate every year in October. If you're not already celebrating Lights On After School, please celebrate in 2025 in October of this year. And we'll have all that information that we'll share out. And the last thing is our after school snack blog. I know Ben takes advantage of this, gets a lot of information from there. We typically have a new blog post up every day. A lot of our policy information is disseminated through that blog too. So if you're ever wondering what's happening in DC with all these debates around the budget and things like that, check out the After School Snack blog. We've probably got a nice little synopsis there, and that is all relevant to after school and education too. Next slide, please. Wanted to start this off with, I know Ben mentioned things changing in DC. We've heard a lot of rhetoric from Congress members and the new administration about, cutting things and changing the Department of Education or closing the Department of Education, moving programs around. A lot of that is just rhetoric. I want to remind folks of 2017. For those that were around, the first Trump presidency, in the budget release of the first proposal from the president, we had the budget director, Mick Mulvaney, doing a press conference and was asked around after school funding because they had proposed to cut 21st Century completely. And his response was that, there's no data supporting this. They're not effective. There was a huge outcry in response to that from not only just the field and ourselves and you all, but legislators and Congress members, to really say, wait a second, like we've seen firsthand the programs themselves and the work they do and the support they provided to families and children. Like you cannot say something like that when it's not backed up by the actual evidence. We saw increases to 21st Century in those next four budgets during the Trump presidency. So just want to kind of remind folks of that. Now, just because that happened I guess, 7 to 4 to 7 years ago, doesn't mean we can expect that to happen again. We'll have to see what's in the president's budget. Do they, propose zeroing out 21st Century again? We'll have to see. And we cannot expect that Congress will push back without us reminding Congress members that these are effective programs and they're serving, pretty much every member of Congress across the country. There's a program in their district, which is a huge advantage to the 21st Century program. We've got someone to point to in every district and say, hey, here's a program that's going to lose funding, that's going to shut down because of some proposals from either the administration or members of Congress. So this is just kind of like the priorities we expect over the next few years. Shifting schools, and a lot of this is based on what was available in Agenda 47, which was the platform that President Trump ran on. A lot of it's coming from the America First Policy Institute, where a lot of the people that are moving into the administration, including the Secretary of Education nominee, Linda McMahon, came from the America First Policy Institute. This is a lot of the verbiage and language they're using in some of their stuff. So a lot around prioritizing schools for job readiness and workforce pathways. There's some things around project-based learning that I think a lot of us are supportive of, and I've seen the effectiveness of those in after school. And then some apprenticeships and internships language. Local and state control, there's been this idea floated for many, many, many years of block granting all the education funding. So all these different titles and all these different special programs, putting them in a giant block grant and letting states have the determination of those funds. That's been tried in the past. I'm sure it'll be tried again. What that would mean if that actually ended up happening is there's even more emphasis on the state level organizing and the local level organizing on saying, now we need to ensure that this block grant includes funding for after school in some way. But a lot of this is like potential things. I mentioned the potential to eliminate the Department of Education or de-emphasize the Department of Education. It's going to be very, very, very difficult to eliminate the Department of Education. It's been tried in the past. It was tried pretty quickly after it was created under Jimmy Carter, and then in the Reagan administration trying to eliminate it, and that was unsuccessful. There are things that maybe they can move out of the Department of Education into different agencies. We'll see what happens there. Cutting of federal funding and federal spending, uh, increasing efficiency under this like Department of Government Efficiency, whether that comes to be an actual legitimate agency, remains to be seen. Childcare is one that in the past the Trump administration uh, seemed pretty supportive of, kind of deputized Ivanka Trump as the person kind of taking up childcare. That was not included in any of the president's platform this time around. So we'll see if there's any support for childcare there. STEM is still kind of talked about among Democrats and Republicans as a supportive issue, especially around like the workforce and making sure that there's a skilled workforce for a lot of these STEM jobs. And the last thing, and this is the one thing that I can guarantee will happen this year, because it kind of has to if you're a congressional Republican, is the extension of the tax credits, or tax cuts in tax credits that were passed back in 2017. What this could potentially do, and this will have, and we'll find out in the next few weeks through the reconciliation process with the budget, like what that would actually look like. What's going to be included in there? Is it going to be just an extension of the existing ones? Are they going to try to cut tax rates further for corporations? Are there going to be some potential expansion of the child care tax credit, which was expanded under the last Congress? So we'll have to see. But we can probably expect there's going to be budgetary impacts around this tax bill. If there's less funding, if there's more tax cuts included in this, and that means there's less money coming into the federal government, that means there's less money to spend. Similar to what Anna was talking about in Utah itself. So if we don't have the money to spend, there's less money going to kids and families. Next slide, please. This is just a graph of the previous three presidents, or presidential terms at least, what they've proposed versus what Congress has actually acted on. I think it's important to focus in on the middle there, where the previous Trump administration, that red line is the one that they proposed. They proposed, as I said, pretty drastic cuts to education funding. And you can see that Congress kind of responded by actually increasing it. We saw the Biden presidency propose huge increases, and Congress was only, their response was pretty tepid, but there were increases included in their budgets. And then you'll see in 2024, that was the cause of the budget agreement between basically the House and the Senate, because the House was under Republican control, the Senate was under Democratic control. They needed to come to some kind of budget agreement, which resulted in very, very, very small cuts. In 2025 is currently being worked on now. It's been extended from last October all the way through March of this year. So by mid-March, it has to be passed or some sort of extension. But I think we can expect more in the next few weeks on kind of what that budget reconciliation bill looks like. Next slide, please. So this is just a little snapshot, what we're calling the Congressional Advocacy Triathlon. These are the three big things that are happening. The biggest one and the most the one that's coming soonest is the reconciliation bill. The one thing I'll mention without getting into too much detail is the budget reconciliation is not supposed to impact spending through the appropriations process. So we won't see any potential proposals to cut things like 21st Century or the Child Care Development Block Grant or some of those other funding programs. It would have to deal with mandatory spending. And we'll see that pretty soon. It has to be done before the FY25 budget is finalized. FY25 appropriations process is kind of the next thing that we're expecting to be taken up by Congress before March 14th. Trying to maintain zero cuts to 21st century is our main priority. We would love to see small increases, but the reality is it's going to be very, very hard to do that. And then FY26 is where, it's unknown. A lot that process will take place after the budget reconciliation goes through. It'll also take place after the president releases his budget. So we'll see what happens there. I will always remind folks that Congress always likes to tell people and remind people that they control the purse strings, the federal spending. So the president can propose whatever they want. However, it really comes down to Congress and actually going through the appropriations process. The biggest benefit that we have when it comes to the appropriations process is what I mentioned earlier, is that like through, for example, 21st century, there are programs that we can always point to in every congressional district that we can say, like, here's a program that's receiving funding from the 21st century program. Here's the work they are doing. Here is the potential impact of any kind of proposed cuts or decrease in federal funding. Next slide, please. A couple other opportunities that we see coming up. There's been some, we've always had bipartisan support for 21st century because it hits every congressional district. It's pretty easy to develop those champions, or at least supporters in some way, or at least not, enemies of 21st century, because there are kids getting served in every district. But we need to continue that advocacy. There's always, a need to reach out to members of Congress, just let them know, you support the program, and we've got action alerts that we always like to share. That it's a pretty easy way to just, show your support for 21st century and after school with your members of Congress. It's all set up, so you just enter in your zip code. There's also momentum, at least on the congressional side, around childcare. We've seen some increases, particularly in this last before the holidays in December, when Congress passed their continuing resolution. There was additional money around there in the kind of the response to the floods in North Carolina and some of the other natural disasters. There was some additional money for childcare, capital expenses. There's been big increases to the Child Care Development Block Grant over the years. I think we'll continue to see that because members understand, for the most part, that families are receiving those benefits. Bipartisan support for childcare in general, and there's an understanding that childcare is just too expensive. So there is a desire to tackle that issue, but it needs to be one of the top priorities in Congress, and we'll see if that maintains itself as a top priority. And then there's also different pieces of legislation out there. We'll see if any of this moves. There's the Afterschool Act that would create a new grant program within the Department of Justice to support after school. That's actually carried by a Republican member in the Senate. So, there's a chance that could move somewhere over the next few years. So those are like some additional opportunities. Ben, next slide, please. And just reminding folks, like, as I said, we've got next month, we'll have an update to this survey, but we always share this with legislators in DC, and always encourage folks to share this with their legislators in their district, that there is demand or there is support. We know the demand is high because most of us probably have wait lists, but the support from voters is also high. And this is support for voters and supporting public funding for after school in summer programs. So there, we've got 80% of voters want their elected officials, the federal and state, to provide more funding for after school, and it's an absolute necessary for a lot of communities. So that's the good thing there. We've always got broad support among the voters and the parents and the families too. And then one last slide that I'll kind of hit on before turning it back over to Ben is just some actions to take. These are kind of in order of like the easiest. As I mentioned, are action alerts. There's a link to that, and I think I can drop that link in a minute, unless somebody else wants to be able to can drop that in, Ben or Angie. But that just takes you to an action alert page where you can send a pre-form email to members of Congress. Now, this is the bare minimum. This will go to their offices. There's always like an intern or a staff member that kind of monitors those and checks and basically keeps track of what they're getting emails on. That's an easy thing to do, just express your support. The next thing, and I always encourage you to coordinate with the Utah After School Network and Ben and his team around site visits, getting members of Congress or state legislators or even local representatives out to your programs to see what's happening, to really better understand the value of the programs. There's no better way to express to a legislator the importance of programs and to get them out, seeing the programs, talking to the kids. If you've got families that want to come there and express, how much that program means to them, that's incredibly effective. And then there's also ways such as letter writing to representatives. There's social media toolkits that we've got on our website as well. If you want to, encourage programs to share things on social media. But there are a lot of actions to take, and it's always best to make sure you loop Ben and UAN in on a lot of those things, because they've got resources, and I think Ben always loves to be included in those meetings or site visits, just to kind of share a lot of that data around like what that funding picture looks like, and any kind of legislative asks that you all have in the legislature. So thank you, Ben. Thank you, everyone, and happy to answer any questions. But hopefully you all can take action and really think of yourselves as advocates for not only your families and your students, but as part of like this greater after school field as well.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be here today. As Chris mentioned, Utah works hand in hand with the Afterschool Alliance. We also work very closely with other states. So really, you guys in working with UAN, you're also joining us in this, national collaborative of organizations that are working to support and promote after-school programming. Again, the America After 3 report is really huge, and we appreciate that. That has some of the best talking points that we utilize time and time again to support after-school programs. And we actually worked with a number of other politically conservative leaning states to give the Afterschool Alliance and the AIR, the American Academies for Research, some guidance on more considerate questions for conservative states as well, so that we can hopefully get a little bit more traction with some of that information as well. So we're excited to see that when that comes out. Does anyone have any quick questions? Chris has to head off to another session that he'll be facilitating shortly here as well. Does anyone have any questions for Chris before he has to go?
There's a question in the chat from Rosie. I apologize if I missed this, but do you know when the new America After 3 report will be out this year?
That'll be released before Lights On After School 2025. So we're kind of, we'll use Lights On as like that big release. So we'll release it before that, I believe, for the main report. So the big report with like the state level data. Then there will be subsequent reports that we'll release over the next few years around STEM, around summer, around like healthy learning and healthy activities and things like that. So we have a couple, and I don't know all the different special reports, but those will be released subsequently afterwards.
And we promote those a ton as well once they come out. So you can look for that from UAN as well. There's another question in here, Chris, if you're aware of, and I'll also direct, if you go to the Afterschool Alliance's website, there's a question here about if there's funding available now for after school or summer programs. The Afterschool Alliance actually has a funding page on their website where they collect different funding opportunities that may be available nationally or state by state as well. Did you want to add anything else to that, Chris?
Yes, so this should work. This is our funding database. So this is essentially, I mean, in some states, it'll have some of the state funded opportunities. If the state's running a grant competition, including 21st Century, but any other types, it'll include that. But it's also got some like national level, philanthropic type grant opportunities that might be of interest if they're serving. Like, I don't know all the different opportunities there, but check it out. And see what might be of interest to your states, or to your, obviously you're all in Utah, but to your programs.
Wonderful. Chris, thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate everything you guys do and all of your support. If anyone has any follow-ups for Chris, you can reach them at the Afterschool Alliance. You can also check in with me, and I'm more than happy to make any additional connections there as well. And the Afterschool Alliance does host a policy meeting that the other after-school networks all attend, and so we're regularly sharing any updates that we get from them on an ongoing basis, or if the after school snack blog is something, we share that out often as well. So we try to make sure that we've got a good pipeline of information that's going out to you guys from everything we're learning nationally. So wonderful. Thanks again, Chris. So next up, we're gonna dive into, we've talked about the state and national landscape, the funding scene in after school, what changes have we seen, and everything along those lines. So next up, we're gonna go through navigating, engaging with the legislature. We'll be sharing some tools and tips as well. So we're going to start off with just some of the basics here in navigating the legislative website. It's very good. It's excellent in being able to track different bills, to look at what's happening, to identify your legislators and things along those lines. So you can either get to it through this QR code. We also have the link here. And so we're going to jump in here and take you on just a quick little tour here. Angie, if you want to tell me where to go and do some explaining, and I'll go where you want me.
Yeah, so I would say just zoom in a little so that folks can see the top navigation bar, where it says like legislators, bills, code, committees, all that good stuff. So this is probably where you're going to want to start. So first thing that I recommend to everyone is to figure out who your legislators are. So if you want to click on legislators, what I recommend doing is finding your legislator by the map. So type in your address, type in your zip code, as Ben is doing right now. 84102 is our office's zip code. So we're kind of in the downtown Salt Lake area, just to give you some context. And you can see what districts are represented within that little cube of red that you see, the red highlight. And so once you have figured out what district you represent, or what district you're in, I should say, you'll be able to figure out what representatives are overseeing that. So you click over to the legislators page, and this is the same. You can do it for the House and the Senate. Ben, what are you doing?
Tell me where to go.
Okay, so go to find by address /map. Okay, type in your address. So we're gonna do UAN's office. Okay, so you can see what popped up here. We're in House District 22 and Senate District 9. So these are the representatives for the district where the UAN office is. So really easy to find who your people are. Dr. Jen Plum and Jennifer Daly Provost are our respective humans. So you can click on their thumbnails, and it will take you to their contact information, the best address to reach them at, and then just kind of a little bit about them. So you can see here, Ben, if you'll go up a little bit. Jennifer Daly Provost is the minority whip. She serves Salt Lake County. She's been serving since 2019. You can see all that good stuff. You can, if you scroll down a little bit, you can see what committees she serves on. So this gives you a really good idea of where she stands on a lot of issues and things that she has supported or opposed during her time as a legislator. It also gives you a good breakdown of what she does when she's not being an active legislator full time. So she works as a teaching faculty and a researcher. Her professional affiliations are listed right there. And you can also see her education. So this gives you a really nice brief background on the folks who are representing you. I recommend looking at both your personal, so like wherever you live, representatives, as well as your professional representatives. If you are going to be engaging in advocacy work on a professional level, I think that it's really important to know both who represents you in your personal life and who represents the region that you serve as a person providing services to youth, right? So you can say like my program is in District 22, but I live in District 25. So both of these districts, it's very meaningful to me. A lot of times, you will see folks who work in the district that they live in, but not always. And so it's good to be able to cover your bases that way. So other things that you can do on this website, if you go over to bills, this is a good breakdown of all of the 2025 bills. So if you'll just click on 25 general session. So I tend to stick just for ease for me. I tend to stick with the House bills and the Senate bills to start with. And if you just click down, you can see there's a very like general description of what these bills are about. So HB 100 or HB 106 is about income tax revision. So we mentioned that a little bit. There's some chat about tax breaks and all that good stuff. So this gives a good breakdown of what you can expect with this bill. You can track this bill through this site. You can see who's sponsoring it, and you can even like click on their little icon if you wanted to learn more about that specific legislator, kind of like we did with Representative Provost. So yeah, you can see we'll do a similar thing if you want to learn more about the sponsor itself. Not always are these bills super straightforward and easy to read. So one thing that I will say is places like Voices for Utah Children do a really, really great job of summarizing bills. And so I would recommend that you, in addition to looking at the legislative website, find organizations who track bills that are of interest to you and utilize those tracking systems to help create a broader understanding of what each bill is actually asking for. So I think that it can just it can help, like me as a person. I have a master's degree in social policy, and I barely understand these sometimes. So I really appreciate it when folks like Anna Thomas and the folks at Voices for Utah Children are able to take the time to really disseminate what is at the core of each bill and kind of what would happen if it gets passed, what would happen if it doesn't get passed, those kinds of things. So yeah, so here's this is a good place to start when you're looking for different bills. Ben, if you would go to 150 through 199 House bill. Right, so we have like education board amendments. That's something that could potentially impact us. School bus route amendments, if you are a provider who transports to and from school, or you coordinate with the school's transportation systems, that's something that could potentially impact you. So the reason I point those out is because a lot of times you're not going to see something that is like after school provisions or after school specific funding, or things like that. So it might take you a little bit of searching to find things that are related to out of school time care. A lot of times it'll be housed in something that is more education related. But we also see like safety related things that could drastically impact our out of school time care spaces and the way that we're like able to provide that care. So really good things to just keep in mind. If these things are not clear to you, then I recommend reaching out to Voices for Utah Children, UAN, other advocacy agencies to help kind of explain things a little bit more. I know we're always very eager to make navigating the legislature as accessible as possible. I know that this can be a huge barrier for a lot of people because there are so many bills. As you can see, this is just the House bills. This isn't even the Senate bills or the other like requests and things like that. There's a lot to navigate and a lot to keep straight. And you all are very busy people doing your incredible work that you do. So if you are interested in like learning more about bills, but you're like, I don't have time to like figure this out, reach out to us. We would love to help you. I hear Anna silently going, yeah, yep. So other things you can do on this website, those are like the two big things, looking up your representatives and looking up bills, but you can also see who's serving on what committees. And this is a good thing to note because it allows you to pinpoint specific legislators to talk to if there's a specific thing that you are wanting to talk about. And it also outlines when they will be meeting if you're interested in attending or testifying or anything like that, sharing your thoughts and perspectives. This is a really good way to get a better idea of if it is not your representative who you are needing to talk to, if it's not the person representing your district, then who is the next best person and what's the best way to get in touch with them. If you know that they're serving on a committee that impacts the issue that you are wanting to discuss, this is a really great place to kickstart that conversation. Say, I know that you're serving on this committee. This issue is very important to me, and I would love to share my thoughts with not only you, but the larger committee as well. So that's another really good one. Otherwise, I would just say play around with this. It's cool to get an oversight of what the legislature looks like throughout the state. It has some good like significant dates. Thank you, Ben. This is a good little calendar for you to refer to if you're interested in participating at the Capitol during the legislative session. There are plenty of days on the Hill, which we will be sharing out as well. We have a little calendar that we can share with you all for days that will be up on the Hill, or our partner organizations will be up on the Hill, and things you can do to get involved that way. But this provides a really good overview of like all of the things that are happening at the Utah State Legislature during this time. So any questions, anything that you would want to add, Ben or Anna?
Nope. And Anna's going to dive into a little bit more about the process the bills go through, what committees play in that, and how you can be engaging as those things are moving forward as well. Right now.
Right now. Well, congratulations, everybody. You've survived through the first hour and a half of this training. Really appreciate your dedication. Angie, that was fantastic. The legislative website is actually an amazing resource, and kind of try and work in a bit here what maybe what you can use on the website at each part of the process. So I'm not going to get 100% into the weeds. People get paid to be in the weeds, but when you are a volunteer advocating as a community member, it can be a lot. So I'm going to kind of give an overview of how a bill becomes a law, and highlight kind of like where those parts are, where it makes sense for people to engage. So literally every bill starts as just like someone's random idea, right? Either a constituent comes to their legislator and says, I'm having this problem with my custody dispute. My lawyer says it's something in state law. Can we work on this? And then during that May to October period that Representative Romero was talking about, you might work on something to address what you see as a problem in your community of people dealing with this issue. That is the best case scenario. Other likely scenarios include legislators just make things up based on their lack of familiarity with the topic. We see it all the time. They don't really understand how the school system works. They don't understand how the after school network works. And they just kind of like make laws that sometimes even try to do what's already being done. Pretty funny. And then a lot of times, to be perfectly honest, the idea just comes right from their national political partners, or, you know, in a lot of cases, like far right think tanks for the House majority and the Senate majority, and they just replicate it and update it for Utah. But at some point, that idea has to get like worked through, and then a lawyer who works for the legislature kind of like figures out, what do we have to do in our laws to make this happen? They draft the bill. That was like that language that Angie very effectively communicated. That's why it's so hard to read. It is legal statute that lawyers write and read. So it is, of course, completely incomprehensible. And then when the legislator is ready, they kind of put the bill out to the public. That's when bills get a number. So you may hear that, like a lot of the bills that Senator Escamilla mentioned she's working on, she's still working on them, like working with the attorney to make sure the language does what she wants it to do. And as soon as she feels good about what it says, her bill will come out and it will be Senate Bill something something. In this little example, we're going to pretend that Representative Romero wrote the bill. So it starts in the House. I do not want to talk down to anyone, but I know many, many very, very smart people who are just like not familiar with this process, right? Like, we have a Congress at the federal level that people tend to be really familiar with because it's usually doing the craziest stuff and is always on the news. Congress works with the president. And basically, we just have the same thing at the state level. The legislature is our state Congress. The governor is like our president, and they kind of follow the same format, working together to make state law. So just like Congress, there are two chambers, is what they call them. There's the House of Representatives and the Senate. And If you go up to the Capitol, you can observe both from the gallery, and you can tell they have their own different characteristics and style and vibe for a variety of reasons. But at the end of the day, both chambers have to agree on language and vote on the same bill to move it on to the governor. So what you see here is Representative Romero will say she puts out her bill, HB number 1, and it goes to a committee that decides which bills are even going to get moved along. So sometimes people propose really insane bills, and there's not a lot of support for them. So they never move out of the Rules Committee. That can be a place to kill a bill, like our legislators mentioned earlier. That one is really behind closed doors. Those aren't public meetings. Those decisions aren't super influenceable unless you're up there lobbying all the time, which I highly do not recommend. But when the Rules Committee decides, okay, this bill is ready to be looked at, and we are going to have a committee look at it, then they give it to some committee. Let's say Representative Romero's bill goes to the Health and Human Services Committee. That committee, it will be all members of the House of Representatives. They get together and they will have Representative Romero come and talk to them about her bill. And then the committee hearing members will say, yes, we should send this on to the full House to vote on, or no, this bill is bad, it is dying right here. Committee hearings are a place where people can engage. I think Representative Romero mentioned it. These are really influential times. So if you know a bill you care about is being heard tomorrow in a committee hearing, you can use the website that Angie went through. You can look at everyone who's on the committee. You could send each committee member an email saying, this bill, HB1, is really important to me, and I hope you pass it. And you can also use the website to testify remotely. Parking and a lot of things are just terrible up at the Capitol. And many of you have programs that are not convenient to the state Capitol. You can testify remotely, and there are good instructions out there that you can use to do that. So if the committee votes, no, this bill is not going to move forward, it just dies, it's over, mostly. If they say yes, then it's like, okay, this is good enough to send along to our colleagues and have all of us vote on it together. That's another place that you can intervene, emailing or texting or calling or visiting your representative to say, this bill is going to get voted on. It's really, really important to this program in your district. I really, really hope you vote yes, right? Or I'm a constituent, this matters to me, please vote yes. So all 79 representatives vote on that. And if a majority of them say, yes, we think this bill is okay, then it passes the House. And then it goes through the whole process again on the Senate side. The Rules Committee, the Senate Committee, the Senate floor vote. So there are a lot of places to kill a bill, but the only way to pass a bill is to go through this process successfully to the end. So it is a lot of work. And at the end of the day, I've put executive appropriations there at the end. Up until the last day of the legislative session, they're kind of like figuring out the budget side of things. If HB1 is a funding bill for the after-school network, even if it's passed all this process, they have to fund it. So you never really quite know exactly if your bill, if it costs money, is going to pass, and it can be until the very, very last minute. And then, of course, once the Senate and the House go back and forth, they vote on the same bill, then they send that bill to the governor's office, and he can either pass it or not. So House committees are really great opportunities to intervene, contacting the committee members, testifying during the committee, maybe even sending a little thank you to people who supported the bill that you like afterward. The House floor vote, that is important too. You can talk to your legislators about voting the way you want before they have the vote. And then there is also too an opportunity. Let's say the legislature passes a really bad deregulation bill for childcare, and we all feel like it's a very serious danger to children. We can also contact the governor's office and say, you need to veto this bill. This is terrible for kids. So we don't have a very bold governor. He doesn't often go against the legislature. So, but it's still a place where you can ask and advocate. And it has in the past worked. And then we always have to remember, passing a bill does not mean something happens. Like, somebody has to take that and make it happen. So if HB1 is a big funding bill for the after school network and it passes, well, an agency has to get the money. They have to decide what the program looks like. They have to administer it. They have to get it out to you guys. So there's a lot involved before and after the legislative session. I would echo what Angie said. Unless you love to super nerd out about this stuff, which is fantastic, following nonprofits that you trust, like Utah After School Network, they will be the ones that will be sending out action alerts. So you don't necessarily have to know when the House committee meets. You just get a message from Ben that says, the House committee is meeting tomorrow. Here are the people to email. So they kind of like take on a lot of work at the front so that you can focus on sharing your story and taking action. So it's a very brief overview of the process and possibly the most positive description I've given of it in several years. So thanks, Ben.
That was wonderful, Anna. Thank you so much for that. Greatly appreciated. Moving on next, we know how a bill comes about. We know the process it goes through. So talking about how we're engaging with lawmakers, something I've said before is it's understandably, I think, one of the very first barriers that we encounter as human beings in trying to engage in the legislative process is that it's kind of scary to talk to powerful people. And some lawmakers definitely present themselves in a way that they don't necessarily seem approachable, or they may seem as approachable as someone who's an actor in television and movies or things along those lines. And the reality is that these are individuals that we elect, that we vote them into office. We can vote them out of office. We elect them to represent us and our needs. And so it is their job. The most fundamental part of their job is to hear you and to make sure that they're acting out and representing your best interests. And so really, it's okay to set those feelings aside. It is a big kind of murky world of a lot of different procedures, a lot of legal jargon, and things like that can be hard. But ultimately, you have a lived experience. You are going through things in your own personal life and things that you're seeing in your community, and you are going to best represent your perspective on how your life is being impacted or the impacts that you're seeing around you. And so it's really important that we're talking about these things, that we pull up our bootstraps and let them know exactly what we're encountering, how this bill will impact us, and things along those lines. And one thing that is important to mention as well is that many of us are nonprofits. Many of us get types of funding that may be restrictive of the types of advocacy you can engage in. There's a kind of a fine line between advocacy and education. And really, I think a good rule of thumb first off is, as you're engaging in this, is to understand your organization's culture around advocacy, to know exactly what you have the go ahead to do, and to make sure that your organization has a plan for advocacy and that you're going about it intentionally. Typically, if you are advocating for a specific bill, that's where you're more in the advocacy realm. That may be something that funding that you're receiving may be restrictive of you engaging in that type of work professionally. If you're engaging in education, that's a lot of what we do at UAN, where we're talking about, hey, this is something that impacts after school. This is what after school looks like. These are the impacts that after school has on our communities. This is why after school is important. And that's really big. I would also say if you're engaging and advocating for a bill, it is good to know your funding structure. So like at UAN, we have some funding streams that are committed to supporting our advocacy work, that don't go against any rules or anything that are put in place by any of our state or federal funding or philanthropic funding that we receive. So just have an understanding of what you are allowed to do. Sometimes it may be a matter of, I'm going to clock out and make this call really quick because it's something that's important to me, or knowing where those boundaries are within your organization. First and foremost, you just don't want to get yourself into any trouble with someone that is currently giving you money. So as we see here, lawmakers, we're the experts. That's come up quite a bit in the conversations that we've been having right now, is they're passing and making bills related to everything under the sun. And so we represent a very small piece of their overall view of what's happening in the world. And so it's really important that we represent ourselves as experts in the field, that we're talking about what we understand. And if we see a bill that comes out or something along those lines that is completely off the mark, which we see a lot of times, we do see bills that are based completely on assumptions or on rumors or memes that people see, all kinds of stuff that motivates what bills are coming out. And so it's important for us to come out to be reliable, to make sure that we're just sharing the facts and what we understand. We have a lot of really good data and research that supports everything that we're doing in after school. And we've put a lot of things together that we've intended to be very digestible for you to be able to look at, to share, to pass out, and things along those lines. As we said, they're very busy. And so looking down the pipeline at how you can engage with their staff, if you're engaging with them more regularly, something that I think is really big is building that relationship with lawmakers so that they know who you are. When something comes up, like I know that Senator Escamilla will call me if there's something that is pertaining to after school programming. She'll send me an email, or her staff will call me and say, hey, this came up. How will this impact programs? Can you tell me a little bit more about these things? The more you're able to build up that relationship with who represents you, the more that they're going to see you as an asset and someone who's knowledgeable about this. And what's really important, something that we are trying to do at UAN, is being more intentional about helping to build these relationships all around the state, because we have relationships with those that represent us, but we want to make sure that you as constituents are also reaching out and spreading that unified messaging and being identified as experts in your region on after school programming. Again, as we mentioned, letting them know that you are their constituent. I voted for you. You're obligated to listen to what I have to say, and I appreciate that. And also in that regard too, if you're running a center or running a program, we have the benefit of serving a wide and diverse group of kids that maybe come from different areas. So it's also okay if you reach out to someone who does not directly represent you. You could say, hey, I'm running this program and I'm serving kids that are in your district, and I'm serving parents. Like Anna said, never say I pay your salary. We never want to be antagonistic in any of our interactions, and that can be hard because we will maybe hear things that we really disagree with or things along those lines, but we always want to be professional. We want to be polite as much as we possibly can, because ultimately we want them to be on the side of our cause and to know that we are someone that they can call up. But let them know your connection to their district, and then reaching out in a variety of ways. Some lawmakers are very active on social media. Some may be more active on social media than they are in real life. So that could be a really good place to engage with them, sending them emails. Again, we do see some of those form letters that go around, and it is, at the very base level, a good way to make that connection. But we did just hear from a representative and a senator that they may not be reading those things. And we tend to hear a lot from people that are reaching out. I sent in this letter and I got this form letter response, and it's like, well, if you send a form letter, you're going to get a form letter back. So what are personal connections you can make? What are the personal stories and anecdotes that you can share, and things along those lines? And then making that effort to build those relationships with lawmakers year round. As Escamilla and Romero had said, this is an insanely busy time of year for them. And so really you may be able to contact them to share some things, but whether they're retaining that or if that's at the forefront of their mind, is really going to depend on how much of a relationship you build with them leading up to something as well. And so really think about that year-long approach to how you're engaging with them moving forward. And this brings us to year-round advocacy. As we've said, by the time we get to the legislative session, a lot of things that are happening have really been decided. We can definitely influence whether a bill passes. We can influence whether something comes out of committee, but we may not necessarily see at this point in time. We're not going to see new bills that are really going to be coming out that we're necessarily influencing. There may be some things that come around. All the bills are not yet finished, but really, we want to be having those conversations that may influence what bills are coming out sooner in the year, throughout the year. And then those are opportunities for you to also engage in multiple levels as well. Something that we put together that's on our website is a year of after-school advocacy to give you some guidelines on what may be pertinent at any given time of year, when different conversations are going to be happening, when you can engage on different levels, when you should invite them out to your program because they're not busy. That's on our website and is available for you to download. So we encourage you to do that. Continue to educate, even if, like we said, there aren't after school bills that are up right now. We still want to be making introductions. We want to be building relationships. We want to be making sure that after school is something that they understand is an essential public good. It's something that we need more support for, that they need to be thinking about. If something comes up that could be impacting after school, that they're being thoughtful of this. Following up after the legislative session, like I said, right now is really a good time to make introductions, to make yourself and your cause known, and then to follow up and thank them. Thanks for taking the time to meet with me. I appreciated getting to meet you up on the Hill, or I appreciated your response to my letter or my email. I'd love to have a follow-up discussion with you or something along those lines. Or if you're a provider, follow up and invite them to your program for something that you may be doing. Program and site visits are huge. We've seen some lawmakers that were not necessarily in the camp of supporting after school programming who went and served hot meals to kids that have come out and they saw the light and were like, I saw the impact these programs are making. These are kids that would not have had dinner if it weren't for this program. Or I got to go in and help kids with their homework. That's really some of the greatest impact you can have in swaying them and helping them to understand what you do and the importance of what you do there. Op-eds and letters to the editor. These are also big too, where you can call someone out, you can make it clear what is essential out there. We saw a number of concerns as we were looking at the new sports complexes that are coming around in Salt Lake, and people asking questions about, like, are these really our priorities? That would have been a really good opportunity to come out and say, hey, that's fun, but we educate kids in our programs about wants and needs. And this is a nice want, but we also have parents that aren't able to get quality care for their kids because there's nothing that they can afford, or there aren't enough slots in programs because they can't staff that program adequately. So this is a real priority for me. I'd love to see more public resources going into this or something along those lines. Like I said, social media campaigns are really huge. Don't just, call out a representative about something directly at them. If you just do something really exciting and your program exists in their district, just tag them in that post so that they can see what's going on, so they can see the amazing activities that you're doing regularly, and you're just on their radar. Encourage members of Congress to join the After School Caucus. There is a After School Caucus federally. We do not have any representation for Utah on the After School Caucus. We've actually had some really good conversations with Burgess Owens, and he's expressed some interest in that. He's actually done a lot for youth serving organizations. And so he's someone that could be really great to get onto that after school caucus. So if you're in his district, that'd be a good way to encourage him to support after school programs. Also thinking, we've talked a lot about state and federal leaders, but also thinking about how you're engaging on a municipal level. Right now, we're actually getting geared up for when municipalities and cities are going to be releasing their city budgets and making adjustments there. So it's also a good time to be reaching out to municipal leaders to understand what they have going on, if there's room for more support for after school programs. We have a number of cities that offer after school programming, like Salt Lake City, the city of South Salt Lake, and things along those lines. So it means a lot to even reach out to them to say, hey, we appreciate your support. The programs that you provide are essential for my family, and we appreciate everything that you do there. Participating in national advocacy events. Like we said, there's Lights On After School that happens in October. There's a National Summer Learning Week that happens in July, I believe. And then we even have After School Professionals Appreciation Week that happens in April. That would be an awesome opportunity to reach out to a lawmaker and say, hey, these programs are doing this stuff. Would you mind sharing out a post on social media about your appreciation for everything that's happening in after school programs? And they may be really happy to do that for you. Joining a regional network. UAN facilitates regional networks around the state, where we actually have one for Salt Lake County. We have one that works from Davis County all the way up to Logan, where we have programs that are working together. And those are important because that's a unified voice for after schools that represents several different organizations. That's a good place to get organized, to make sure that you are reaching out and have unified language about what your needs are, what your unique regional needs are, and that you're making a unified effort to reach out to those individuals. If we have 12 programs in a regional network and they all get together and talk about what their needs are, what's important to them, and then they all reach out separately, then that's going to make an impact on whoever is hearing from them. And then lastly, ask the UAN team to join you. I'm really excited to go out on site visits, to join you for meetings. We're more than happy to provide state or national context around what's happening in after school programs, and to talk about a number of different things that we can do there as well. We actually just had we had the Salt Lake Area Regional Network to share their email, so you can join their meetings as well. They have a meeting that's coming up next week, and anyone is welcome to join. I'm sorry, I'm speeding up because we're about at time here as well. Something that's really big that I mentioned, and I'll kind of gloss over this, unfortunately, is motivating after school champions. In our state, and nationally, we've seen the power that parents have, where we see a lot more parent advocacy groups that are very active right now. We've seen a lot of education reform that's been driven by parent groups and what they want to see. And our parents in Utah are our workforce. They're voting citizens. They're people whose opinions matter, and helping them do what they need to do is really important. And so what I'll say about this is, if everyone that's here, if every organization that is here, every program that is here thinks of 1 to 2 parents that you can encourage or invite to specifically reach out to their representatives to talk about your program, we have about 25 different organizations that are here. And of those 25 organizations that are here, I can estimate that we maybe have 40 to 60 different programs that are here. So we're looking at, you know, up to 100 or so parents that are all reaching out at the same time after this meeting to talk about after school programs. And those are parents that are saying, I can work because of this. I can work feeling comfortable about my kids after school because I know that they're safe and they're engaged. Or my kid is on a waiting list in a program and doesn't have any place to go after school. And that makes me really nervous. It makes me afraid to work the hours that I need. And I'm concerned about what's happening with them. So think about those things. Think about personal stories that parents and kids can share about your program and why it's so important to them. And so I'd say that's, you know, a homework assignment that I'd assign to everybody here is think of at least two parents that you're serving and asking them to reach out on your behalf to a lawmaker to talk about the impact that your program is making for them. Some after school advocacy resources. We're going to share this out as well so you can see some of these different things on your own. I'm sorry, I'm going to borrow just a couple minutes so I can get through the last of this. This QR code also takes you to UAN's advocacy tools on our website where we have scripts, we have templates for letters. You can find your lawmakers there as well, a number of different things. And then lastly, to wrap things up, register for After School Day on the Hill. It's on the 12th of February. You can join UAN's Advocacy Committee. This is a statewide committee where we're talking about all these things. We're talking about calls to action. We're talking about everything that we can do as a statewide committee to really impact everything we're doing in the field. Reach out to your legislators and invite them to After School Day on the Hill. Like I said, I upped the ante. I said here, identify one parent, identify two parents. You can do it. Have your kids send a Valentine to your legislators. Our After School Day on the Hill is 2 days before Valentine's Day. We have Valentine templates on our website as well that you can use. So please use those and have your kids send those in along with an invite for them to come to After School Day on the Hill. Take pictures with your legislators if you're at Day on the Hill, tag them on social media and thank them for their support. And lastly, follow up with an invite to your program and remember to invite UAN to that as well. So with all of that being said, I'm sorry we had to rush through some of the last of the things there. This was super comprehensive. I'm really excited that we got to have so many different partners come to the table to share a lot with you guys, but there's a lot to share. Please feel free to reach out to us. You can find all of our resources at utahafterschool.org/advocacy, and then follow our newsletter, everything along those lines. Thank you all for your passion and everything that you do for kids and after school programs. We're here to support you in your efforts. And so just know that you're not alone in everything that you do and that we can do this and make the case for after school. So thank you all so much. I'll be following up with a recording of the training today, as well as the slides that you can use at your disposal as well. So thank you all so much. We greatly appreciate you and good luck as you're getting out there. And I look forward to seeing you After School Day on the Hill.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.